Okay, we should be live. If people can hear me, say hi in the chat. Let me know that you're out there, and we'll get started. So, what I'm going to be doing this evening is working on the Soviet werebear models, which are a redesign of a figure we did a long time ago and are being updated and upgraded for Konflikt. Um, yeah, so we'll get going. I'm going to start by showing you the original model, and I'm going to show you some artwork from the rulebook, and I'm then going to show you the work I've done so far on the new model and talk you through the process. We've got Chris and H are in the chat, so they'll be able to answer questions as we're going, and hopefully this will be a useful process. Because this is the first time we've done this, I actually do not know if anyone can hear me or not, so I'm assuming that you can until I hear otherwise. So I just need 10 seconds to set a couple of things up and then we'll get going. Right, so let's talk about the Soviet bears. The Soviet bear model, it's one of the unit types from the main rulebook for the Russian faction. It's a pretty hard-hitting assault unit, and we might be able to sneaky peek some of the rules for the model in a little while. However, to start with, I'm going to show you the original concept model that we did quite some time ago. So this was a model designed for when we were doing the 15mm range. Um, this is an unposed, completely basic model, just blocked in for us to pose, and I'll be taking you through the posing process as well as some more sculptural work later. So this was our 15mm model, which is, it's fine, it's cool, we like it, but it's quite basic, and it lacks a lot of detail and a lot of the proportionality that we want in the range for the 28mm bolt action version of the game. So I've been working on the new version, which looks like this at the moment, and there's quite a lot of work to be done here. As you can see, I've been sculpting in a torso, a body, as my main piece, and I've brought in the head from the original model, but I've resculpted and detailed it and reproportioned it quite a lot to be more aggressive and less cartoony looking than this one. And I'm going to be working on this today and developing this some more. You'll notice the head is completely separate from the torso. In fact, what we've got here is 4 separate parts at the moment. We've got a torso, we've got a head, we've got the eyes and the teeth, and we've got this lump at the back, which is just a stand-in showing me where some of the fur is going to go. That'll be one of the last things that I add because that will depend on the posing of the model, and we'll be doing several different poses, so I'll add these things separately, and that's also the reason for keeping these pieces separate. We want those separated so that, let's do this. We want all of these bits separate so that it's easy for me to position them and change them and get some nice poses. So let's take a quick look at the artwork from the rulebook. So this is a first. This is one of the illustrations from the rulebook showing the werebears assaulting a German motorbike patrol using a piece of rebar and concrete as a weapon. And this is the look that we're going to be going for with them. They're big, they're brutish, they're pretty cool. So to that end, what I've been doing today is just working on building in this muscle work, and you can can see it's quite rough at the moment. So we're going to be developing that, and then if we've got time, I'll be moving on to add details like claws to the hands. I'm not worried about the feet because we're going to be putting boots on. Same reason the legs aren't detailed, they're going to have trousers on. But we might get around to working on that detail as well. Remember that if you're watching the stream and you want to ask questions, please do so. It is my only way of knowing that you're out there and interested and listening, and the guys will do their best to answer them. So without further ado, I'm going to start work on the body. So let me just get rid of everything else. Grab my slash tool. I'm just going to be finishing off some of this muscle work that I started earlier. So you'll notice that what I've done, or the look that we're going for here, is something that's more naturalistic. It is an extreme exaggerated set of proportions, but it is a little more naturalistic than the very cartoony version that we had before. And I'm still at the stage at the moment where I'm just kind of roughing things in. So while I'm doing this, I'll talk you through the software and the process of digital sculpting. This is the program we use. This is a program called ZBrush, which is it's pronounced the American way because it's an American program, and it's a digital sculpting tool. And I have all of these brushes at the side here, and they all do different things. The one I've got selected at the moment is a slash brush, so it cuts, if I push really hard, it cuts into the surface of the model and produces lines. The other brush that I'm going to be using here is this clay brush, which lets me just very gently build up mass, and then I can smooth it in, create extra definition and detail. So I'm just going to be working around the model at the moment, and I'm just building up the bulk forms. The back's not going to be as detailed as the chest of the model, because a lot of that's going to be hidden by a layer of fur once the model is complete, so I don't need to worry too much about that. But I just need to make sure that these main muscle groups are present and correct. So I'm just going to be bulking these out and just adding a bit of form. And then my main area that I want to work on in a moment is actually the hands. As you can see at the moment, they're quite basic. And I'm going to come in and add some more detail to them. And the way I'm going to do that to make my life a bit easier is I'm going to isolate them. So, you notice I've got both hands and I've got symmetry turned on, so I can sculpt on both sides at once. So let's get on with that. I should just say, if anyone is asking questions in the chat, that because there is a delay on how the streaming works, it's about 10 seconds behind. So for me, it's incredibly distracting to have everything that I'm doing mirrored with a slight delay. So I do actually have the chat window minimized. I'll occasionally I'll dip into it just to see what's going on and try and respond to what you're saying, but don't be surprised if it's one of the other guys that answers your question, or there's a delay before I seem to answer it because the stream's behind. So even if I answer something immediately, it'll seem like I haven't. It's just building up a little bit of form here, just gestural really. This is very, very rough, and it can afford to be at this stage. I mean, one of the things that can be very deceptive doing this is scale. Obviously, you know, this hand is probably about 4 millimeters wide when the model's printed out and produced. So I don't need to be too precious about the detail on this. So while I'm doing this, there's a little hole in the mesh there, which I'm just gonna fill. So while I'm doing this, I'll tell you a little bit about the unit. It's a close assault monster of a unit, the Russian werebears. They can be armed with modern weapons, but they are absolute brutes up close and personal. And that's where they're going to see their main use. They're a product of the same sort of genetic bioengineering that the Germans have been using to produce the Nachtjäger, which is the game version of the vampire, and the Schreckwolfen, which obviously is a werewolf. And these guys are the bears. Are exceptionally hard to kill. They're tough. They are very strong, and you don't want to get on their bad side. Of course, they are still mortal. They are human at the end of the day. So a well-placed machine gun nest or fire will take them down. There are no super units, as it were, in the game. There are things that are better than human, different than human, but don't go charging machine gun nests with your werewolves, or you'll be very sad. You'll have a lot of dead dogs on your hands. So you can see what I'm doing here is I'm just cutting in with the slash tool, and you'll notice that there's what looks like pixelization. These little squares that you can see on the model are actually the individual polygons, the individual squares that make up the model. And once I've finished blocking in this broad detail, what I'll do is I'll divide to a smaller level. I'll make these smaller so I can add finer and finer detail. So at the moment, you can see this is the detail level. These are the shapes that I'm working with. Just by dividing them down smaller and smaller, we can add greater and greater levels of detail. I'm just going to rough this in. A bit of mass over the top. Switch to a slightly different brush that builds up my form in a slightly different way. It's really nice for just nipping in these bits here. See, those hands look a bit nicer now. They've got a bit more form to them. Again, not worry too much. There's a lot of detail missing and lacking around the hips. There should be hip bones that are protruding and muscle mass here. But because I'm going to be building trousers over the top, I'm not overly concerned about that at this stage. I'm just going to quickly have a look. Someone's asked if for something like this, do you start with human proportions and then begin to exaggerate? Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I work from a series of I have a series of sort of basic forms that I use as a starting point, and this is based off my sort of Incredible Hulk, Mexican wrestler, Superman proportioned model. But this, this level of sort of hunched overness has been built in today from a much more upright and slightly differently proportioned mesh. I mean, it depends on the model as to whether or not you start with a human form or if you start with something completely unique. Sometimes when I'm doing less realistic models like goblins or what have you, it's quite fun to just start with a you can start with a sphere and let me just show this quickly. If I make it into a polymesh, turn on symmetry again, and then just use this to imagine that you're going to have some shoulders and a rib cage, and just sort of rough out. So that's going to be the start of the ribs, and then grab the clay tool and start to pull, build up. So you start to build up a sternum, and mass out some shoulders, and then you can throw a head on there and build in some musculature, and start to just very quickly and easily build up a form and create a creature from scratch. But when I'm doing something that's very human, or at least realistic proportions, I like to start with one of my existing meshes because there's a lot of stuff involving like muscle insertion and how you lay together the shoulders and the arms and the chest muscles that is a pain to keep recreating over and over. We're working in a production environment to produce results in a reasonable time frame, so that people get their toys. You've got to get people their models. I'm just gonna bulk up the back muscles right here and bring that right to there. Apologise now if you hear any strange noises in the background. I have a very overheated cat sharing the room with me and making his displeasure at the temperature very known. Just gonna so I'll work very close to the model for a little while, and then it's a case of zooming out and getting a sense of how that looks overall, looking for anything obvious. Because of the nature of what we do and the detail level compared to the size, there's a lot of stuff that's going to be it's going to look quite exaggerated and quite rough on the screen. But it's like that because it's got to cope with being shrunk many times over, and then it's got to be able to take paint, and you've got to be able to run a line of ink into it. I enjoy painting a great deal, and I've cursed enough models in my time that I've not been happy with the depth of detail. So I try to err on the side of caution and make sure everything's nicely defined. Good. So I'm going to bring the head back in just to have a look. It's not attached. It's a complete, this is a complete cheat. If the head was where it should be, it would be further up. But for the type of model we're going for and the fact there's going to be fur, I can get away with some stuff. Let's combine the head with the eyes and the teeth. I do want to just play with the position. So that there is here is a more realistic position for it, but it doesn't feel as strong because you lose the weight of the shoulder muscles sitting above. So that might be a little low though. So let's try somewhere between the two, maybe there. That's all right. Someone's asked if the stream's just about sculpting. So I'm going to be talking about sculpting pretty much because that's what I'm doing. However, if you've got questions about the game as a whole, please ask them in the chat because H is in there. For those of you that don't know, H is one of the game developers. He, alongside Chris, worked on a lot of the rules. H is also the guy that makes all of the crazy things that you see happening on the screen become a reality because he is the master of 3D printing and the production side of things. So he's well positioned to talk about how the models end up being produced. He's positioned to talk about the design of them in the game, and he's also able to talk about the game itself. I think he's even got, dare I say it, he's even got a copy of the rulebook in PDF form, courtesy of our good friends at Osprey and Warlord. So, without giving too much away, if you've got some very specific questions and you ask nicely, there's a chance that you might get some answers. Right, I'm going to stop working on that for a little bit. Bring back in that lump of fur, extremely basic lump of fur. I'm just going to give it some mass and add a little bit of definition because it does look currently like he's wearing a damp paper towel on his shoulders. Again, I apologise if you ask a question and then I seem to answer it sometime later. That's just the nature of the streaming and the delay. So So, for anyone who is interested, intricacies of fur and hair are quite difficult to do. So, of course, I've chosen to live stream doing a model that's covered in it because I'm an idiot. It's a good example, though, of sort of working in ever-increasing levels of detail. So you can see that I've roughed out these sort of very broad pieces of mass, and now what I'm going to be doing is going in and refining them, and adding extra strands and extra levels of detail to try and capture some of the dynamism. This is another area where I've got to be quite exaggerated because of scale. Thinking about how big these guys will be. I mean, these are big models, though. The werebears are going to be, well, they're not on your standard sort of bolt action infantryman 25 mil disc base that most people mount their models on. They'll need to be on significantly larger bases in a sort of traditional war game. They'd probably be on sort of 40 mil bases. They're pretty hefty. I mean, if I grab that picture again, you can see this is probably a slight piece of artistic license, this bear compared to this poor rider, but it gives you the idea. These are big guys. They Mother Russia, they make them big. This speaks to something that we've discussed on the Facebook page as well about the design of the game and the factions. There's no obvious goodies and baddies in the game. There are levels of how far people are willing to push the science and the ethics. And some nations have embraced different elements of it. So, but all of the nations are experimenting with what they can do in terms of human enhancement with the exotic science and particle technology they've got available to them, of which the bears are some. There is another unit, another 2 units in the Russians that have had enhancement science added to them. There's a cold-based infantry unit, which I'm a big fan of. They're quite a favourite of mine. And there's a female unit of super soldiers type models, sort of Mother Russia, Captain America hybrid. Just finish a bit more of this and then zoom out and see what we've got. So if I scale this out, you can see how this is building up to create our fur texture out of this very basic texture. I'm just working a little bit. I just want to get this bit around. I'm not going to bore you by sculpting an entire back of fur. That would be very boring. However, I just want to nail this intersection between the head and the neck, just so that I can see how the head is sitting on the body, because that's going to help me define my position and proportions. One of the great advantages of digital sculpting is we can make quite broad proportional changes at various points in the sculpt, which are not necessarily possible in a more traditional sculpting medium. And I should add just quickly, this is not the final fur sculpt that will be used on the posed models. This is just to help me. Even if I do reuse this piece, it will be resculpted and modified to allow the posing. Yeah, you can make quite big changes, but I want to just be able to see where we're at and then decide if any changes need to be made. So it's been great. I just say it's been fantastic seeing the response on Facebook. We've had over 1,100 people join in under a week. So that's awesome. Thank you very much for all of your support. We don't do the Twitter thing, otherwise we promote that. But our Facebook page, which is actually it's a Warlord Games page that we are working alongside. That will be our main point of contact, and hopefully you've seen that we're pretty responsive, pretty active on that page. That's fine. I'm going to make some trousers for him. I'm just going to use a tool here. So yeah, thanks for all the support on the page, as I say, and we'll continue to be releasing previews of artwork, and there are some rule previews coming soon, and design articles talking about the philosophy, if you like, behind the game and the reason we've done certain things the way we've done them, what makes our game Konflikt as opposed to an other weird take on World War Two, which there are several with very fine pedigrees. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm just creating this mask. This dark area is a mask. We use these a lot in ZBrush. What they allow me to do, I'm just going to do a quick save because it's a little flaky at times, is masks let me do all sorts of things. One of the things I could do, as a quick example, is where I'm masked, my brushes don't affect. So you can see that if I try and pull this or I try and inflate it, there's a hard edge at the mask where I can't do anything. One of the other functions it can be used for, and this is what I'm going to use it for here, is I'm going to try and extract a new mesh. I'm going to extract a new object out of it. That might be a little thick, so I'm going to change my setting to half that. Try again. And this is how I'm going to very quickly be able to create some trousers. Too thin. Let's try one more time. Fortunately, there's no preview function, and these numbers don't really mean a lot in the real world, so I have to kind of guess. That's fine, so I'll accept that. What I've now got is a set of lovely trousers, or rather, the start of a set of trousers. I'm going to delete the interiors, and close them up so that they're solid. One of the quirks of 3D printing is that the model can't have any holes inside it, which it's surprisingly easy to do working in a computer, but holes are bad. They cause all sorts of problems. So instead, we're going to take these bits and turn them into a pair of trousers as a solid piece, so there's no hollow fabric. It's all a solid chunk, which means that it won't cause us any problems. At the moment, it's got this nice triangulated bit where it's filled the hole, and these nice squares where the original piece was. And I'm now going to do something to create a new mesh, right, which is going to let me get rid of some creases and holes that I knew would cause problems. Just smoothing, sort of universal smooth this out button, which I'm using. So it doesn't look like much at the moment, but that's going to become a nice pair of trousers. To adjust their positioning, and they'll have strapping and belts and pockets and fabric creases, and they'll tuck into a nice pair of boots. I'm kind of toying with the idea of leaving him barefoot, but it doesn't seem very sensible. I just realised barefoot is a terrible pun. It doesn't seem very sensible that operating in the cold that they don't cover their feet. I think it's logical that he has boots. And you can see there I do not have my symmetry turned on, which I need at this stage. eventually it becomes necessary to break the symmetry of the model, otherwise the model ends up looking very, very boring. But when you're doing this early proportional blocking in work, the symmetry button is a great time saver. I'm sure there are plenty of traditional sculptors who wish they had access to such a thing. Shaving off some of this and building it back in just doesn't want to feel as form-fitting as it currently does. So I'm just going to pause and have a look at the window and see what's being said. There's a lot of chat going on about army composition, which H can certainly handle. He's probably the best person to do so. It's a terrible confession of mine, but I know how to play the game, but I'm so focused on the model side of things, I don't know how armies are put together. It's not my job, man. It's not what they pay me. Okay, so that's given me an indication of where the trousers are going, and I'm going to come back to those shortly. It's bothering me. These hands don't feel as powerful as I want them to be, and I think it's because they're a little smaller. So I was saying earlier about making proportional changes. I'm going to show you the kind of thing I mean here. There's several ways I can change the proportion of the model. I can physically sort of pull at them, and you can see that as I do so, it's just going to add in a little more bulk and thickness to the wrists. And if I wanted to, I could widen them slightly as well. I don't want to go too wide. It's important that we keep a sense of a wrist. One of the other things I can do is by dropping down a couple of, so this is the full detail, by dropping down the detail levels, down in them, I can isolate the masking function again, isolate the hands. So I've got symmetry turned on, it's done it to both of them. Just need to check that I've got this button activated. And I can both increase them in size, a touch, and I can also, by finding the right part, the right axis, just thicken them out, make them feel a bit heavier. That's more like it. That's a nice size for them. And if I just jump back a couple of steps, let's bring them up on the screen, just see the difference between there and there. So that's good. From there to there, it's a small difference, but it'll make a big difference later when I'm trying to pose them and I've got much more depth to work with in terms of moving the fingers around. H has just pointed out that the other reason that I don't play as much as I sculpt is because I'm not a very good player. I lose all my games. It's so harsh and yet so true. Right. I want to put some claws on these. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to create a claw. So we're going to do a quick save. Jump over here. Shockingly, I think everyone will agree that this is a disgraceful set of circumstances. Is H is not only gamely controlling things on the chat in the stream, but he's also smack talking me privately on Messenger as well. So I have to put up with. You see what I have to work with. Michelangelo didn't have to put up with this crap. What we're going to do is create a fairly use this masking function again, which is going to let me curl this end over. It's very crude at this stage. But again, I'm going to use the Dynamesh tool. just have to bear with me. I've got a slight amount of slowdown. It's because we're streaming, so obviously that's a bit more taxing on the computer, so it causes some additional slowdown. It's a good idea if I use the correct brush. This is going to be our claw. So looking at it from above, and this is the end that will go into the finger. So put some striations into it. It's fun to paint. What I'm going to do is turn this to insert. A little bit of mouse lag there, but I think we're all sorted now. So let's do this. Insert mesh, click new, set a depth, and let's test it. Deeper. So back to our bear. And again, this is a point where I'm going to do a brief save. And duplicate our bear. Just work on him alone. It's a case of placing each of these claws so that they're just the way I want them to be in terms of height, depth, size, and so forth. So I want this one to be slightly longer, so I'm just going to pull it forward. Let's take a look. It's a little off centre, so I'm going to move it. That's about right. Repeat with the others, and once I've got them all in, I'm going to go in and sculpt in some detail around the fingers to support them and help with the painting of the model. So in other exciting conflict news, after I've completed these models, I'll be moving on to working on a German unit that's needed pretty shortly after main book release, which is one of the Germans' more advanced pieces of tech. It's an infantry unit. And then after that, I'll be signing off on another Russian unit that's being worked on by another sculptor who's working alongside me. Then we'll be working on some more vehicle stuff. There's some more Walker related things that need to happen pretty soon because the British variants of some of the game's core walkers need a little bit of TLC to get them ready for release. But quite a lot of this is quite a lot of the first wave stuff is completely in the bag, and the first production models have been coming out of Warlord, and they look great. So the reason I'm turning this off and on is I'm checking the colour of things because it tells me which bits are connected, and I'm going to use that as a tool for splitting these off. Delete this, don't need that. There's our main body again. Let's turn on the claws and just do a bit of work around. It's quite nice to have the book release so imminent now. It feels like a long time coming. We initially began work on Konflikt stuff in 2013, I want to say. Maybe even sooner than that. Some of the very early work might have been 2012, so it's it's very exciting to be reaching a point where it's finally releasing. Though I've worked on quite a few fairly large game releases, not least of which for Warlord was designing several of the armies for Gates of Antares. This one's our baby. And, the very first miniatures that I ever produced were Konflikt figures, albeit 15mm ones, but Konflikt nonetheless. So it's very gratifying to be reaching this point. See, that's nice, we like that. That's a good solid claw. It'll cast well because it's not too sharp. It's got lots of detail that will take paint. There's a nice channel and a ridge, so you can run ink into there and it'll pick up a natural highlight. Even if you're a dip painter rather than a brush painter, that's going to work very well. So we're happy with that. They look good. Good claws. Good claws. Cool. Right. Yes, these claws are due to my extensive career as a manicurist. That's right. Okie doke. I'm gonna do some work on these trousers now, just adding in some cloth folds. And then, by way of a short break, because we'll be about just over halfway through, we'll take a look at a few of the other models that have been produced for the game recently, just as a little browse, and then I'll come back to working on this. So I apologise if you hear any noises. I'm just about to have a quick drink. Hopefully that wasn't too horrible. Someone has just commented on our Facebook page, or sorry, what I should say is someone has just drawn the attention to the comment on our Facebook page that this is cheating. It's a very tongue-in-cheek comment. Cheating compared to traditional sculpting, because I've got infinite zoom, and I don't have to wait for anything to dry. And it's, there's a lot of truth in the fact that there are a number of advantages for a production pipeline to the digital process. Not least of which being I can make so many quick, sweeping changes to the model, which production managers like a lot, because one of the issues is that people might spot things that need changing, or there might be a change of direction artistically, which you would hope wouldn't happen because of planning, but the reality is that it does. And the digital method, digital process, whatever you want to call it, is very responsive to such changes. At the same time, there are things that the traditional sculptors can do that's trivially easy that is quite difficult digitally. One of them is funnily enough, as we were looking at earlier, fur, which to get right um, in traditional means is a skilled task, but to start blocking it out is quite simple. Whereas for some reason it can be quite elusive digitally. And I will freely hold my hands up and say, without a shadow of a doubt, I watched the amazing team that I've worked with up at Warlord on Gates Vantaris, and there we used traditional sculpting for some models, digital sculpting for others, and in some places a hybrid where parts would be designed, for example, a gun or a basic chassis would be designed digitally and printed and then sculpted, either detail added on top or it would be used and added to a traditionally sculpted model. So we've run the full sort of gamut really, and I couldn't do what those guys do, and I know that's a fact. The skill they have for working at that small scale is very impressive. I think that like so many things, I think that the digital way of doing things is likely to become more common because the things I mentioned earlier about its ability to fit in so well with a production pipeline and its responsiveness to changes. But because something is more appropriate to meeting deadlines or making quick changes doesn't make it better or worse. It's just a different tool. Again, I should point out these are not final trousers. What I'm doing here is I'm just blocking in enough fabric, mass, and general feel that it kind of looks like cloth on the legs in a minute when I finish. But like things like cloaks or belts, this sort of stuff is very what I call pose dependent. You can't really place the folds of the cloth or the flow of some things until the model is posed. So when I'm doing the sort of basic figure, which I will use as a maquette for posing, I add this stuff so that I've got a sense of the model, but this is not the final sculpted detail. I'll pose the model and then I'll rework the cloth so that it's appropriate for the position of things like the knees and the legs, where the tension of the muscles lies, how I want the folds to lie. So, I mean, I need to add pouches and belts and whatnot, but it gives enough of an impression for me to get a feel for how the model's going. I'm not too worried about these bottom edges because again we're going to be adding boots, so these trousers ultimately will be cinched in to some boots. So what I've basically created there is where the fabric's going to gather as it sits on the top of the boot, so the boot will come down off here. It's better. It's getting there. It's got a lot of work to do here because he's going to have a fairly hefty belt put onto him, and there'll be straps that run up the body and go into the fur, and straps on his arm. He'll be wearing a sort of webbing harness that he can have his kit attached to. But I'm just going to pause now. As I mentioned, we're going to do a quick save. You'll notice that I'm just using the same thing over and over again and just renumbering them so that if I decide that there was something in an earlier model we needed, or we need some reference from an earlier stage, I've got it to go back to. And whilst we're whilst we're paused, I'm just going to walk you through a few other models just as a little thing. So let's take a look at some of the other stuff that we've been working on. Some of this stuff you will have seen, some of it you won't. So this was interesting. This is Jaeger. So these are our these are our vampire analogues. This is one of them. I just load the same model twice. That was clever. Let's try that one. There we go. So let's talk about the Nacht Jaeger for a little bit and just explain what we're looking at and how they fit into the game world and what they tell us about the game. So this is probably our most sort of horror kind of model that's in the range at the moment. This is our vampire, effectively, and it was created by the bioterror propaganda science weapons division, which has a proper book and not what I just said. And it's a human lizard, alligator, bat, and Lord knows what else hybrid. Um, and they obviously are pretty horrific to look like. They hunt using a sort of sonar echolocation. They can fly. Naturally, they can fly. They are strong. They are resilient. They can withstand a lot of damage. Um, but they are the products of science. They are not the products of magic or the supernatural. So you can't. They don't really care if you're armed with silver or garlic. It doesn't really matter. They aren't killed by sunlight. They just like to zoom around, pulling people's heads off. Um, and it's a good example of the sort of philosophy in the game, in that everything has a scientific sort of rationale, even though it's kind of the slightly hand wavy pseudoscience that we're using to rationalize things into the game. It does make a difference because deciding that something is created through scientific means gives you rules and gives you boundaries and affects the power level and the feel of the game. And so the Nacht Jaeger is a good example of this, in that because it's a bioweapon, because it's an engineered human, and because it's the product of a scientific process, certain parts of the vampire myth, if you like, apply, and some parts don't. So it gives us a creature that's quite unique to our game, and they look pretty cool too. What else should we have a look at? Let's have a dive in. This is so slick, isn't it? Just looking to see if I could find us something from the US side. That's the US Marine, armed, wearing. Well, he's not actually wearing it because it's not plugged in properly, but it plugs into his back. It's a jump pack with the anti-gravity rings, which are the same ones as appear on the walkers. And these guys are US jump troops. This is their equivalent of a paratroop, but it allows them to move around on the battlefield. They're pretty cool. And, again, it's the same science technology kind of basis. You'll see the same equipment used on the walkers and on other areas because it's the application of a specific set of technology that they have. Then last guy I want to find, I don't know where he is, so I'm going to do a search. So this model will be familiar, I hope, when it loads. This is not quite the final version, because on the final version his head had to be slightly bigger, otherwise he'd have been about 17 feet tall. This is the Slammer Samuels, who is the limited edition miniature that we produced, that Warlord are giving away with rulebook orders. And he's one of the Paragon program, which is a super soldier program that the US have got running, similar to the Russian program, that produces some of the units that you'll be seeing soon. He was a fun model to design, fun model to produce. There were some obvious pop culture references that we wanted to fit in with this guy in terms of referencing certain comic book characters and certain movies. Um, and he's one of a team, one of a team of uniquely skilled individuals. So there'll be more of these guys, more of his unit coming. They're all going to be pretty unique individuals. Hopefully, you guys will have a hand in helping us conceptualize them. That's our 1500 group member target. There we go. That's Sam. Jump back to here. If anyone's got any further questions, oh, just having a look. Can I show an earlier stage next to the point I'm at now to show development over the hour? Yes, I can show that. It's not that dramatic on this model because we've not been working super fast, but what I'm going to do is we saved him, didn't we? So what I can do is pull up a quick save from the start of the session. Put this on the screen next to the work that we've done. So let's just screenshot him and then load our latest version. Side by side, here's the work that we've done. I don't know how apparent this will be, but in the session that we've done, I have added a lot more definition to the torso and arm, bulked them up. I've thickened the wrists, added a lot more detail and definition to the hands, as well as adding the claws. I've adjusted the position of the head compared to the rest of the body. I've sculpted in some fur just to get a sense of how the head is sitting in the body as a whole. Over here, you can see on this one that he's just got his very raw, undetailed legs. Over here, we've blocked in where the trousers are going to fall, which helps us sort of conceptualize the model as a whole. Obviously, we've not added any boots yet, so he's still got these sort of placeholder feet. But hopefully, you can see in an hour how the model is progressing. I mean, there is a considerable amount of work still to do, obviously, but we will continue to progress forward and make that happen. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the progress that we have made so far. And what I'm going to do then, just to demonstrate another part of the process, is I'm going to show how we create straps and things, because I actually going to do this in a different program. And I'm going to add in the webbing because it'd be quite handy to have to help me understand how the model's coming together. So we've got this saved, which is great, so I don't need to worry about losing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge the model together to create a single piece. You can see that up here I've got little numbers. There are 5 pieces that comprise this model at the moment: the torso, the claws, the trousers, the head, and the fur. I can split and bring these pieces back together as I need them to, but for sculpting purposes, it's handy to keep them in separate sections. But what I want to do now, which is take this model as a reference into a different program, I've merged them together to create this version, which is a single piece. So I'm going to reduce its polygon count, which basically means I'm going to reduce the amount of data that this model is holding in it, which will make it much smaller and easier, but I can't edit this version, which is why I've made a duplicate, why I've made a copy. It's a bit like taking a Photoshop file and turning it into a JPEG. It'll look the same, but I can't edit it. But I'll use it as a reference for what I need to do. So I'm just going to do that. So I'm going to hit the pre-process button, and I apologise, we now have to wait while a little taskbar goes across the screen. Now is a good time to get a drink, a cup of tea, maybe go online and pre-order your copy of the rulebook. I'm going to use this opportunity to have a quick drink myself. So, technically minded, what's happening now is the computer is reading the surface of the model, looking at the shapes that I've created, trying to work out how to it can preserve that shape with the minimum number of of topographical points. So I've got a percentage slider here. The lower I set it, the fewer points it will try and use to preserve the shape. At the moment, there's 2.379 million points making up this model. To give you a context, that's about 75 to 100 times as many points as make up a character in a video game. It's way more than most programs can cope with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce this down to the model is now 82,000 points, which is much more bearable. And if I zoom in, you can see what it's done is it's triangulated the model, so it's worked out the minimum number of these individual points that it can use to retain the shape of the model. And the more I reduce this, the fewer points the model is and the less detail it has. So now it becomes almost like an impressionistic wood carving of the model because we've got so few points. But I'm going to stay at the 82,000. That's quite a comfortable number for the programs I'm using to cope with, and it looks nice and normal. So I'm going to export the model as Ursine base, which moves it into my Windows file so I can stick it in a different program. Minimize this. Let's hop into here. So I'm going to import my model. It's an object file. I need to browse to it quickly. Ursine base. And there it is. So just how embarrassing. My mouse buttons are set up for gaming rather than sculpting, so I've just changed them. So you can see I've got it here, and unlike the other program where I'm sculpting, this is a piece of modelling software, a CAD program, if you will, that will let me have very precise control over what I'm doing at the cost of being much slower to produce organic shapes. What I want to do is take this little dot here. This is a vertex, it's a single point. I'm going to position it roughly where I imagine the straps are going to flow. I'm going to mirror it. And then I'm basically going to play a dot to dot game here. I'm going to draw on where I want my strapping to run. Block it out. And then imagine the other half of the same strap running up the body. Into the fur. And then I can use the F key to fill those straps together, which creates these two flat planes which don't look very exciting. So I'm going to add a solidify to them, which lets me thicken them out. And then the last thing I need to do is just change my view settings so I can see them a little more easily. all the way up into the body and all the way down into trousers. They look very crude, so I can add a smoothing modifier. To make them look a little more appropriate. Sharpen their edges. Gives me the start of what I want. I'm probably going to want at least one connecting strap, possibly two, across the body. Again, these are not final because they will be affected by the pose of the model, but they are helping me define what I want from the model. So again, I'm going to quickly isolate a single point, and I'm going to use it to build where I want the belt to run. I already know that I've got to make the trousers sit higher than I was able to achieve with the masking. So the belt's going to define where I want the top of them to run. There are other ways of doing this. I have an extremely talented fellow sculptor, a guy named Dave. He does a lot of work for companies like Privateer Press, and he does a lot of the mechanical stuff like what are they called, the Warjacks. But he does it all inside the sculpting tool, and it's amazing to watch. And it's just a different approach to achieving the same result. I like this method because you can see I can control the thickness really easily, and I can see the changes live, and I can adjust it on a very granular level. So everybody has their own special way of doing things. This just happens to be the one that I like. It works for me. There are no hard and fast rules. That gives me an idea where the belt's going to be. I want to add the cross strap. And once I've added that, take this back in and talk about how I would detail it. Just going to go with that for now. I know that they're going to have a strap around here and possibly a second strap here, but I just want to take these basics in while I'm blocking out the model. So I'm going to export them and give them a really super intelligent name like straps. I realised that yes, they would in fact also run down his back, but I'm not worried about that too much right now because the main purpose here is to block in the model and be sure that I'm happy with them, and also show how the process works. Right, so there are my straps that I've just designed and created, brought into the new program. Go back to our main model and append them, which adds them to the model. There we go, awesome. So we now have our straps back in here. And it's at this point that it's possible, if I so chose, to do things like add detail. So if we wanted harness buckles, or these are previously sculpted detail, to give you an idea of the kind of thing we can have. It's probably a little grossly large, but it gives a good sense of the kind of thing we can add as additional detail, and we can build it up like that. just going to leave those there. I'm not actually going to have those on there, though. They can stay for now. Just to help me, again, get a sense of the model. Someone's asking in chat if the US get any demi-human, or rather, sort of bear-like or wolf-like abhuman troops. There aren't any in the first book. However, I'm pushing for that kind of thing to be a thing, and part of our whole ethos of there not being obvious goodies or baddies would imply that such things must exist in all nations. So never say never is all I'm going to say on that score. Right, we've got about 15 minutes left. And so I'm just going to do a bit more work on this fur. Yes, this is my normal way of working. I will bounce from one part of the model to another to another. It probably seems quite random, and in many ways it is quite random, but it means that you don't get hung up working on a single small bit of detail that then looks odd when viewed in terms of the whole figure, because you're constantly moving across the model, you're constantly viewing it as a whole composition, and therefore you're updating across the figure as a whole, and you're moving from very broad levels of detail to medium levels of detail to the very fine stuff, and you're keeping the whole model in mind while you're doing it, which is really key for keeping the figure feeling cohesive. Otherwise, you can end up with, I've seen it and I've been guilty of it, models that have lots and lots of detail, but it's all kind of separated and isolated and doesn't feel like part of a coherent design. So it's important to avoid that. And as has been pointed out to me by H, plus I also get bored quickly. There's some truth to that. I mean, seriously, people, how many hours of my life am I willing to spend sculpting individual strands of fur before I seek the solace of another part of the model to work on? Oh, we're going to be wrapping things up relatively soon now. I'm happy to, if people want to, put up on screen a screen capture of the rules for the Ursine, although I can't promise that they will make a great deal of sense without the book as a whole. I can, however, show them, and they can be discussed and picked apart. So we'll do that in a minute. I'll read them through, and we'll see what these Russian bears actually do. And I do have to make weapon options for them as well. They're not a purely tooth and claw fighting unit. They do have weapons that they use. Zoom out, take a look at that. Obviously, the final version, there'll be work done to merge fur in with the body. I mean, there's an element of that here, but this looks dreadful. But the final version will be fixed. And there's going to also be, there'll be fur patches here on the arms, fur run down the back. I think that's probably it for the fur. going to be pouches, not pouches, sorry, pockets on the legs, equipment pouches on the belts, a kit on the webbing, strapping on the arms, which hold stuff that they can use aggressively. But yeah, he's coming together quite nicely now. That's not been an unproductive hour's work, hour and a half's work. We should see this model finished, ready for posing in the next sort of 24 to 48 hours. And then we'll put together the full squad based on the army selection. So, on which note, let's take a quick look at the rules for this. Right. This has been passed to me. So, Ursus infantry, as Soviet scientists became more proficient copying and then enhancing the German DNA splicing techniques, they developed a number of stable adaptations they could create consistently. As German Schreckwaffen began to terrorize frontline troops, the Soviets developed a counterweapon utilizing Ursine DNA to create an 8-foot tall man-bear hybrid that could go toe-to-toe with any of the enhanced infantry on the battlefield. Powerful but lacking control, the Ursus soldiers were often unleashed in highly contested areas of the battlefield to tip the balance in favour towards the Soviet army. 66 points for 3 Ursus soldiers, a regular troop choice. They have no weapons. How odd. Okay, maybe I don't have to make weapons for them. Although there may be some options that I can't see in this brief grab. Add up to 3 additional Ursus at 22 points each. They are large infantry. They are resilient. They are tough. They have the horror rule. They have tooth and claw, and they are strong. All of which are special rules defined in the book, keeping with the bolt action system of not having inverted commas stat lines, a la some games. There are a number of special traits that weird infantry can use and utilize, which enables them to be more than human and more than standard infantry. That's why you'll see within the conflict rulebook there'll be models with more special rules than you might typically see in a standard bolt action game, enabling us to capture the flavour of the weird and unique creatures that exist in bolt action. In Conflict 47. So yeah, large infantry stands for itself. Resilient and tough are both mechanics that make them difficult to pin and difficult to kill. Horror has a negative psychological effect on people attacking them. Tooth and claw is a way of representing how dangerous in close combat they are. The tooth and claw rule makes them extremely effective in assaults, and the strong rule likewise makes them effective in assaults and gives them the ability to damage things that ordinary mortal humans might not be able to damage or cause anything negative to with their bare hands, whereas these things are pretty brutal. So there we go. There's the Ursus infantry rules. They'll make a lot more sense if you knew what the special rules actually did, but that is for another time. Let's move that off to one side. Okay. We're coming up pretty much on the end of things now. Someone's asking about how often we would see new models coming out after the initial rules and starters. That's kind of in your hands, in that the design space and the ideas that we have allow us to produce a lot of things. However, what we need is for the game to do well enough initially so that Warlord and Osprey are keen to see more releases. We have all sorts of crazy things planned for the game. It's just a case of being able to get them out. We're already talking in terms of a supplement after the main core book release. So, and we've got quite a few additional plans, not just for new units for the 4 factions in the book, but new factions, new theatres, new ways to play. So hopefully we will see a great deal more conflict as time goes by. I'm going to wrap things up. I hope this has been useful, informative, entertaining, at least it's allowed you to pass a bit of time. If you have any questions about the game, the models, the sculpting process, the way we're designing things, the use of digital production, uh, please use the Facebook page, the official Warlord Conflikt 47 group. That's the best place to get hold of us. Everybody involved with the game's production and design are active members of that forum, and we're just counting down now till the game's release. If this has been a useful video for you, a useful stream, then let us know. We'll try and do some more. We'll try and do some different content. We might do some painting or modelling content, maybe even some gaming content if we can get things like webcams and microphones and people to all appear in the same place. But for now, thanks very much. I'm going to be closing the stream down, and I will see you all guys at another time.